Chapter 19, Part 2. So in this video, we're going to be looking at specific personality disorders. The three main groups of disorder include the eccentric cluster, the erratic cluster, and the anxious cluster. And in each of those, we'll discuss 3 or 4 personality disorders. There we go. Yeah, so here's a little visual for you to help remember the 3 different clusters, okay? So cluster A is about odd thinking and eccentric behavior, okay? So in all 3 of these, mainly the schizotypical and the schizoid, characterized by very, odd, eccentric thinking. Then we get into cluster B, that is dramatic and erratic behavior. You're probably already familiar with narcissistic, histrionic. You may be familiar with. If not, you will likely recognize it when you see it. Antisocial, I'm sure you've heard of before. Borderline, maybe possibly a little bit less. But we'll look at those. And then finally, cluster C, severe anxiety and fear. Okay. This one probably, you may know less about this cluster. Obsessive compulsive disorder, dependent personality, and avoidant personality disorder. Okay, so let's start with odd thinking and eccentric behavior, cluster A. So this group, ways of being different in the book. They contain traits that combine the personality traits that they have combined to make them very, very sort of odd, behave strangely, okay? Ill at ease socially, they're very uncomfortable in social situations and around other people, appear to act in highly abnormal ways in the presence of others. Most of the oddness of these behaviors has to do with, so they act a little bit strange because they're very uncomfortable around other people. Okay, they don't know what to do. It's just awkward. Okay. Some have no interest in others at all. Some are extremely uncomfortable with others. And then the third group are some that are suspicious of others. So the first one, the first 2, the schizoid and the schizotypal, these have their roots in schizophrenia. There's a tie to schizophrenia in terms of like the detached nature. Both exhibit low-grade non-psychotic symptoms of schizophrenia. So they are fairly similar. There's a small difference. And then paranoid personality disorder, that one's quite a bit different from these 2. Oops. Oh my goodness. Okay, so there we go. The first one, this one has 0 interest in being around other people at all. They have no desire for intimate relationships. They have no desire to have friendships. They just don't want to be around people. Personality is split off from social relations, completely indifferent in social situations. Passive in the face of unpleasant events. They're just blah. There's just nothing there. They tend to choose hobbies that can be done alone, like they'll play video games or they'll have jobs where they work on their own. They're completely indifferent to other people. They don't respond to social cues at all. They give the example of, in the book, about a person who has schizoid personality disorder, and they would just walk up and stare into a room, and there's people in there. Right? And they just stand there and stare. And they don't care. And they have no desire to start a conversation. There's no awkwardness for them, but there's awkwardness for the people in the room because there's this, dude in the hallway who's just staring at them. And so just completely withdrawn and they just don't care. So that's schizoid. Okay. Number 2, schizotypal personality disorder. This one's very different. You can remember this one by this guy here, Salvador Dali. I'm sure you've heard of him and his work. He's an artist. So these ones, instead of being indifferent or blah in social situations, they're incredibly uncomfortable. Okay, they get anxious, they're tense, they just are so uncomfortable around other people. They think they're different from other people. They are different, kind of, and they don't fit in. Odd or eccentric beliefs such as ESP and magic. Unusual perceptions that border on hallucinations. They feel like other people are watching them. They often violate social norms. They don't make eye contact. Their clothes don't go together. They're just really, really awkward. The other key point is in a group setting, they don't become more comfortable as increased familiarity of the group. So if you walk into a group setting and there's a group of people that you don't know, you might feel anxious at first, and then as you get to know them a little bit, or as time goes on, you become more comfortable, right? With people with this personality disorder, they do not become more comfortable at all. In fact, they become more anxious and more uncomfortable. It just gets worse. Okay. Yeah, so very eccentric beliefs, the way they look, the way they dress, the way they act. Yeah. Oops. And this is the third one, very different from the first two. Okay, so when you're thinking of this cluster, think of the first two together, and remember the differences between them. The first one, this one, they're schizoid. They're completely indifferent, blah. This one, they're very eccentric, and they're not indifferent. They're horribly uncomfortable. Okay, so there's some differences between the two of them. And then this third one, completely different from both of those. This is paranoid personality disorder. They're very distrusting of other people. They assume that everybody's out to get them, or they're conspiring to get them. Misinterpret social events as threatening, prone to pathological jealousy. So they'll be very jealous of their partner, say. And there's no evidence for their partner doing anything wrong at all, but they will search and search and search for evidence until they find it. Something to support their jealousy. Argumentative and hostile nature provokes others to combative response. So because of the way that they're acting, they evoke sort of hostile responses from people, right? And then this in turn, of course, when they're hostile back, that confirms, in their eyes, that confirms that they were right. So they're very unreasonable, hostile. They're very difficult to get along with. The second cluster, ways of being unstable and emotional. Okay, so the cluster B is about erratic emotions and just being very dramatic. So the first one, antisocial personality disorder, aka sociopaths, psychopaths. This group, if you heard superficial glim and charm, I remember that from my intro psych from years ago. Superficial glim and charm. Yeah, that's sort of the hallmark, the core of them is the superficial. They can be very charismatic. But they have very little concern for others. They don't care about other people's feelings. They're easily irritated and assaultive, or they can be charming. Whatever's going to get them what they want. And they really don't care about anybody else. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care if it's right or wrong. They don't, nothing. Lack of guilt, feelings, or remorse, indifferent to the suffering of others. There's just zero feeling there. Typical problematic behavior. So arise in childhood. So typically if somebody is going to have antisocial personality disorder diagnosed as an adult, like after the age of 18, they have to have had these behaviors when they're a child. And the behaviors include like just breaking rules, cruelty towards animals is a big one. Like killing small like rabbits and dogs and torturing animals. Lying, destroying property, maybe pulling weapons in a fight, anything like that. So often, because that could just be an issue when they're young, and then a lot of them grow out of it, right? But if they don't grow out of it and they have this problem, these behaviors as a child, then they grow out of them. They will, if they keep them, they'll likely be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. If you do not have these behaviors at all in childhood, then likely it's something else. So it's sort of a key thing is that it's seen in childhood. Borderline personality disorder, instability. It's marked by instability of relationships, emotions, and self-image. So borderline, just think borderline, however you're going to remember that. Borderline off the charts. Everything is off the charts. Their relationships, their emotions. Relationships tend to be intense and violent. They have these strong fears of abandonment. They think people are going to leave them. And if you leave me, I'm going to get angry. I'm going to get aggressive, prone to self-harm or suicide attempts to manipulate people back. So if you break up with them, they're going to, excuse me, prone to do something to themselves in an attempt to get you back. A piece of research cited says 72% of the hospital patients in the study that had borderline personality disorder had a history of suicide attempts, average of at least 3. Now, of course, if they're in the hospital with borderline personality disorder, of course, it's going to be a little more severe, right? But that is a very high rate. Strong emotions, impairment of emotional perception. And then the third piece, self-image. So they usually perceive themselves as evil or bad. They've got very shallow values and goals. They change their opinion very, very often. Some research has suggested a cause of borderline personality disorder being a loss of love from parents due to death, or loss of love because of abuse or neglect or parental drug or alcohol abuse. Three, histrionic personality disorder. This one, you can sort of think of this person here, right? Histrionic personality disorder has to be the center of attention. Excessive attention seeking and emotionality, overly dramatic. Who's the mother in Grey's Anatomy? And her mom came in, I think, when she was going to have a baby, and her mom was all over the charts, and she's got extra makeup on, and she's like 50 something, and she's being awkwardly flirtatious with the doctors. It was very inappropriate, right? Anyways, I would say that she would be a good example of histrionic. It would be even more useful if I could remember her name. I think Sally Fields played the mom. Anyways, think of somebody who acts in this way. Sometimes because they're trying to get attention, they'll dress in provocative outfits, but inappropriately so. Or they might wear like a lot of makeup or big hair or whatever it is, because they're trying so hard, right, to be the center. They're trying so hard to get compliments. They just kind of go over the top. They're difficult to get along with due to constant need for attention, crave excitement and novelty, but their interest does not last long. Yeah, forego long-term gains. So they're not much for delayed gratification, right? So they're, instead of going for long-term goals, anything that's short-term, that's exciting, that's what they're going to be going for. Okay, so that's histrionic personality disorder. And then finally, narcissistic personality disorder. This one I'm sure you've heard of. Okay, this one you hear about lots on social media and whatnot. Strong need to be admired. Okay, strong self-importance. So they're always talking about their accomplishments. They're talking about how awesome they are, how great they are. If other people's accomplishments are mentioned, they are going to downplay that, right? Sense of entitlement. Feelings of superiority and privilege. They believe they deserve high respect from others even though they haven't done nothing to deserve it. So they're just awesome, right? Everything they do is amazing. They do really well at their job. They've got the highest sales. They've got the highest this. Everybody loves them, yada, yada. I mean, that is their belief. Now, they appear that they have super, super high self-esteem because of the way they talk. However, it's actually a paradox because they have very, very, very fragile self-esteem. They are highly sensitive to criticism. If you criticize a narcissistic person, they could just blow up and get really angry. But that's because their self-esteem is just so fragile. Envious of others. If they're praised for anything, you start praising somebody else around a narcissistic person, they're very quickly going to turn it around to themselves. Sees themselves as unique and special and better than everyone else. And the third cluster is around anxiety, is anxious cluster. Okay, ways of fearful, being distressed. Cluster is geared towards avoiding anxiety. For all of these, avoidant, dependent, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder, they're acting to avoid anxiety. But the problem with this is that when they're acting to avoid anxiety, they're causing other problems for themselves. And we will see what that means. Boop. Avoidant personality, pervasive feelings of inadequacy. Okay, so think of this person here. Okay, they just have low self-esteem. They just think they're nothing. So they do everything to avoid criticism, right? They're terrified of being criticized or being rejected from others because they just see themselves as nothing and losers and failures, right? So because of that, they avoid going in social situations. They choose jobs that are by themselves, work independently, so there's no chance that others are going to criticize their work. It affects school because they don't want to be around other people where other people may see them make mistakes where they can be criticized. They're seen by others as meek, shy, quiet, lonely, solitary. They avoid making new friends because the new friends might see what a loser they are or how they're making mistakes, or this new person may criticize them. Anything to do to avoid failure. Now, the downside of this is because avoid life to reduce failure, missed opportunities. There's so many opportunities in their lives that are missed, right? In terms of social relationships and jobs and everything, adventures and travel, anything. Also, due to social isolation, they have low social support because they're just by themselves. Dependent personality disorder. These people seek out others to extreme. They desperately, desperately, desperately need somebody else to tell them what to do, to make decisions for them, to tell them, give them advice. They just need to be taken care of. Okay, they act submissive so others will take care of them. They need encouragement and advice about absolutely everything. They rarely take initiative. They rarely disagree with others. So they will tolerate abuse from others so that they keep their support person, right? So even if they think the person that they're dependent on is wrong, they will not say anything. They'll just go along with whatever they say or whatever they do so that they will keep taking care of them. And the dependent person can keep their caretaker no matter what they do. Great difficulty in making decisions. Yeah, so that's that. And then finally, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, the next slide I have here with Howie Mandel, that's OCD. That's the one you probably would have heard of the most. Obsessive compulsive disorder, that's the one where it's debilitating, it's serious, it's their OCD around germs, OCD around so many different things. check the locks on the house 10 times. Just so many like realistic behaviors, frequent hand washing, repeated actions. You can watch the video. It's a great video. It'll show exactly what OCD is and how debilitating it can be. Now, OCD is different from obsessive compulsive personality disorder. This one you may not have heard of, but please remember the difference. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder, in this one, people are striving to be perfect. They have rituals, they have schedules, they have procedures for everything. I have examples here. So they may plan out the clothes for every day of the week. They're going to clean the houses on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Shopping is done every Sunday morning. Plants are watered on Mondays and Thursdays. Just everything is laid out so that nothing gets missed and everything is perfect. But they're never totally happy with the result. They're devoted to work. They seek very little leisure time or friendships. They're very much focused on this schedule and having everything perfect, to the sacrifice of their friendships and spending time with other people. Frequently miserly or stingy, so cheap. Rigid and inflexible with regards to ethics and morals. So ethics and morals and the way that they do things, that is the correct way, and they are not flexible on that. Yeah. So take a look at this video, as I said, and the difference between these two things. And then, then that is it for the 3 clusters of personality disorders. Let's go back for a quick little review here so you can remember them. There we go. So cluster A, odd and eccentric, right? With the schizoid and the schizotypical being very strange and paranoid being paranoid, thinking people are out to get them. Cluster B, dramatic and erratic. Okay, it's all about getting attention, and just being erratic and emotionally unstable. And then C is all about anxiety and fear and living in a way that reduces fear and anxiety and avoids it as much as possible. And that is it for part 2.